Texas has the constitutional right to defend itself from invasion. This is an op-ed from Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. He has posted this in the New York Post. We're going to read through it, but what I continually hear is people saying, was it really an invasion? We're going to watch a video. Stay tuned. Here we go. And when people whine and complain about, well, Texas putting up all that razor wire, it wasn't really an invasion. It was just some poor people that were escaping violence from back home. And yeah, here's where we got here. And you're like, okay, let's take a little quick look at this video. This is where we were just a couple of months ago.
This is at the southern border now, and the staggering new record: more migrants crossed into the U.S. on Monday than any other day in history. And now Texas is being sued after giving state law enforcement sweeping new powers to arrest them. Morgan Chesky is there.
Tonight, stunning images from...
Look at that. If that is not an invasion, I don't know what it is. What exactly would you call that? This is taken from bridge number 1 in Eagle Pass in Texas, and you are looking south. You've got the river right here. You've got the shipping containers, and then you've got another one of the bridges right here, vehicle, and then you've got a train bridge somewhere down there as well. But look at these folks. I mean, you've got thousands of people. If that isn't an invasion, I don't know, right? They're all wearing those, they call them space suits, but they're not blankets made out of cloth, because that could, you'd have lice get, passed around. These things they're the emergency blankets. Keep them warm.
Eagle Pass, Texas, where thousands of migrant men, women, and so many children now fill entire fields. The groups lining the Rio Grande clinging to blankets, huddling to stay warm, all waiting for hours to be processed, and most likely to be released into the United States. Of all our trips to Eagle Pass, this is the largest group we have ever encountered. Sources tell us the majority of these families are Venezuelan, and we've just learned from authorities nearly 3,000 were apprehended just yesterday. On Monday alone,
3,000 in a day. That's not an invasion. That's an invasion. So when Abbott says invasion, I'm kind of like, yep. And this is why that is happening.
A staggering new record. DHS officials telling NBC News more than 12,000 migrants crossed the U.S.-Mexico border, the most recorded in a single day ever. The surge sparking a new battle between the Lone Star State and the White House. Republicans here blaming President Biden's border policies for a record number of illegal crossings.
Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself.
Now Governor Greg Abbott signing.
When you've got thousands coming across your state border, which is also the federal border, you can't argue with them. You can downplay it and say, it's not really an invasion because they weren't armed forces. We don't know who these folks are, right? We don't know what kind of human trafficking is going on. We don't know what kind of drugs people are bringing. We have no idea. They're just coming on in by the thousands.
A new law making illegal immigration a state crime, empowering police and sheriff's deputies to arrest migrants. Texas has already put controversial floating barriers in the Rio Grande and barbed wire along the border, but both face ongoing challenges. The White House calling the new law extreme. The ACLU of Texas saying,
how is protecting your border extreme? What's extreme about it? You either protect the border or you don't. So what's extreme is allowing thousands of people who you don't know, they're not vetted by any means at all, into the country. This will be fine. This will be fine. And then next thing you know, illegal, just shot a bunch of people. Illegals, they're going after cops in New York. I mean, you've seen all the big news stories. Those stories, they're just going to glom onto those stories because we all knew this was coming. We all saw it, coming from miles away. Greg Abbott has pressed all that pressure up into California in Arizona. And this is basically what was the start of that, him really going hard, protecting the southern border, particularly in Texas.
They'll sue.
that is going to drive our immigrant communities into the shadows. It's going to increase suspicion of relying on law enforcement.
How much longer can you keep up?
No, we can't. We can't. Now it's like 3,000 or 4,000 right now. So they're coming in.
Maverick County Sheriff Tom Schmerber tells us they're struggling to cope with the number of migrants, but the new laws only raise new questions. Namely, where newly arrested migrants would potentially be held. His jail holds 250, and today sits just below 200.
I don't have the resources. I won't have the space. Where I want to put them.
Morgan, we see those massive crowds of migrants behind you, and officials say they expect more soon.
Lester, that's right. The sheriff tells me that he's already been warned by Mexican authorities who say despite the railroad closing down, a large group of migrants has abandoned that train and is now on foot, expected to arrive in this Eagle Pass area by the end of this week.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking.
So that was that incredible surge of people coming through into Texas. That is what precipitated all of this. You know what? Screw it. We're going to do it on our own. Texas is going to do it on their own. And they effectively have. And they've pushed all that pressure to other parts of the country because the cartel has realized, oh, you know what? If our folks get busted by state troopers in Texas, they might get deported back home. That's not a good look for our business. Our business is predicated upon selling drugs that kill people and illegally human trafficking people into the United States. So, Greg Abbott is not good for the cartel's business. But, they adapt, they pivot. You talk about people pivoting. Well, you need to do a little pivot with my life. They're pivoting and they're going elsewhere, going up to San Diego County, right? They're going through the Tucson sector, going into New Mexico. We don't hear about New Mexico a lot, but they're still going through this southern border in Texas as well, just not in the numbers. 60-70% of all the crossings are happening now up in California or Arizona. Another big place, northern border with Canada, coming through there. Makes sense if you can figure out a spot. One of the most crucial rights granted in the U.S. Constitution is a state's ability to secure its own border. Weird, right? James Madison, the father of the Constitution, emphasized that Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 would allow Virginia state militia to be called forth to suppress smugglers who had endangered their state. Those smugglers were bringing contraband into the state and threatened the sovereignty of Virginia's borders. Madison knew that states must have the means to defend themselves. John Marshall reinforced his right held by states. He too was an important advocate for ratifying the Constitution and later a Chief Justice on the Supreme Court. Marshall explained that Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 clearly proves that the states can use the militia when they find it necessary to respond to an invasion or imminent danger. That's where we've got this huge rub. Like if you've been down to the southern border and you kind of realize, all right, if these illegals come across the river, which they are coming across illegally, that's not how you do it. They are illegal and they get picked up by Customs and Border Protection. All those guys are going to do and gals are going to do is escort them into the country. Just keep that whole human trafficking thing going. Whereas now, because Abbott has said, here's our rules, here's our laws, this is what we're going with, because you feds, you're not doing your job. We have to take this on our own. This is what we're doing. State troopers, you can arrest these folks, send them to jail. Judge can deport them back to Mexico or wherever they came from. Simple as that. So when folks say, well, he doesn't have the right to do that, I would say, well, if the federal government isn't doing it, this is pretty clearly, this is what's going on. And I support Texas and what they're doing. I think what they're doing is amazing. I think what they're doing is great, and it should have been done a long time ago. But here we are. This is where we sit. Today, Texas faces a similar but starker threat than Virginia's smugglers, with Mexican drug cartels that operate as paramilitary forces on our border. That's something that a lot of folks on the left don't want to recognize. You're dealing with Mexican drug cartels, paramilitary, not even para, straight up military forces, right? On our border. That's how they operate. They're mostly just helping people get into the U.S. You know, we're escaping. But the cartel's doing an invaluable job. They're doing it for money. They're doing it for money. Earning billions of dollars a year, smuggling illegal immigrants, the cartels pose an extraordinary danger to Texas and to our United States. Some of these smuggled across the Texas border are known terrorists. We've caught, 169 off the terrorist list as of a few weeks ago. Others are wanted for murder, sexual assault, or violent crimes. In just the past 3 years, the Texas Department of Public Safety has arrested more than 39,000 convicted criminals smuggled across our border by the cartels and then Customs and Border Protection into the U.S. on the U.S. side of things. An invasion? Yeah. It does seem to be that way, right? I mean, I would tend to agree with that. The numbers you're talking about and some of the folks that are coming through. The cartels also bring in deadly drugs like fentanyl. Fentanyl is now the number one killer of Americans aged 18 to 45. A generation of innocent Americans is lost to these smugglers, my son Brennan Reynolds included. Lost my son to this. So it's a very real issue to me. If you've ever lost a loved one, if you've lost an offspring, one of your kids, son, daughter, I had the 1-year anniversary last Monday, and it was horrific of my son's passing. So this topic is pretty important because it doesn't seem like our own federal government is defending our own borders. So somebody's got to do it. If Abbott steps up, I'm like, 2 thumbs up, because it's not just Texas. It's not just the Cali border. It's not just the Tucson sector border. It's all these drugs and who knows what's coming through into the United States. And this is where it's happening. Drugs, chemicals shipped by China into Mexico. Mexican cartels put it together and they, stream it into the U.S. It's not like we, don't know this. It's not like this isn't an actual operating thing happening every day. It's not like, we don't bust cartel members with incredible amounts of drugs every single day. And it's not like people aren't dying of fentanyl overdoses every single day. You can't avoid any of that. It's just not even an option. Well, it's not really happening like that, Sean. Yeah, it is. My kid died. This is what's going on. This is the reality. Try and sugarcoat it as much as you can. Nah, you can't. Every state has become a border state. Texas alone has intercepted enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the U.S. And by now, just about everybody knows somebody, whether it's a ridiculous podcaster from Seattle who lost his son or somebody else in their lives knows somebody that's died of fentanyl. And this is coming from the cartel, from Mexico, where this same invasion is happening. You want to call it something else? Go ahead and kid yourself. But I'm not going to believe you, not even for a second. That is nonsense. The criminal smuggling activity faced by Texas far exceeds Madison's criteria for use of a state militia. So this is where people would argue, but it wasn't an armed, incursion. It wasn't an armed invasion. Like, no, to me, the fentanyl is a form of arms. It's killing people. So what are you talking about? They're not armed. Well, they are, just a little different. It's a different. You've introduced fentanyl and people are like, give me the good stuff. That gets them really high. And then they die. And that's what we're dealing with. So Texas and the 25 states whose governors support our efforts, Texas's efforts, is utilizing Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the Constitution to defend against imminent danger or invasions. That constitutional provision is the Supreme Court of the supreme law of the land and would supersede any federal statutes to the contrary if Congress ever passed one. I mean, Abbott is throwing down here. He is throwing down. He's saying, hey, you're not going to do it. We will, because we're going to do it for the rest of the United States. We're going to protect our border and the border of the entire country along Texas. Can't do anything about the other areas. And that's the big rub to me. How do you think this is going to go, putting all this pressure on California? I mean, that is not going to work out well for California. Texas is leading the fight with the help of governors from across the country to do the job that President Joe Biden has failed to do. He's not only failed to do it, he has unwound through executive action so many of the things that resulted in record low people coming across the borders in general. And then he stopped building the wall. He did all these executive orders, the use of just allowing people to just go, parole, mass use of parole when it's totally not meant for that. The stay in Mexico until you're vetted, that whole thing. Nah, just let them in, it'll be fine. And now we have record levels of people coming into the country. That video we saw at the beginning of this podcast is exactly what you had going on. And people are like, there's a lot of people coming in. Oh, weird. We will continue to build barriers that deny illegal entry into our state, arrest immigrants that cross illegally, and fulfill our duty to secure our border. I say good. I have no issue with it whatsoever. I have no issue with putting up, concertina wire, putting up the razor wire. I just don't. It's like, all right, this is what you do. It makes total sense to me. But I am a conservative podcaster from Washington State, if that tells you something. So there's that, right? No, I just think there's so many people, especially here in Washington State, that go, that's not an invasion. He can't do that. The feds should be cutting the razor wire. It's like, why? Why should they be doing that? What's your point? You want to just allow some more of this in? Is that what you want? All right. Well, you and I live in a different reality, right? Just like our founding fathers, we will illustrate to Americans exactly what our great Constitution provides and how its structure empowers the states as well as the federal government to preserve the safety and well-being of every American. We are the inheritors of a responsibility first recognized by our brave ancestors more than 235 years ago. As long as we must, we will defend our state and this nation from grievous threats to our border. I don't think you can argue that there are grievous threats. Number of people dying from fentanyl, the number of people being trafficked, sex trafficked, the number of criminals coming into the country that are pulling all kinds of shenanigans now that we're seeing on a daily basis, that those of us on the right said, you know what, this isn't going to end up well. You get too many shenanigans waiting to happen. And so now we've got a shenanigans aplenty, right? You know where we don't have those? Eagle Pass, Texas, Shelby Park. Those numbers have plummeted. So did you need that $118 billion package? Or did you just need to, I don't know, protect the border? Not that hard, folks. Yeah. All right. I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks so much for being here. This topic to me is super basic, and yet most people, they just want to get out of it somehow. They just want to ignore the reality and just go on this, they're poor people and they're trying to get away from violence. I don't see it that way. Love to have you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell, hit the like button for this video, and I'll catch up with you in the next one. Thanks again for being here and watching. We'll see you then. Bye for now.